Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Yasmine S, cardiologist and best-selling author, and this is my podcast, Positive Vibes on the Sunny Side. Each week, my goal is to bring you uplifting stories and insights to inspire you to live your happiest, healthiest, most positive life. So thank you for joining me. I have some of my own good news I want to share. My second book, my debut fiction title, The View from the Cliffs, is in the top 20% of all new titles released in the U.S. this year in terms of copies sold. It has also now been read on 3 different continents and has received international acclaim, as you'll see from some of the reviews I included in the second printing. And yes, the book is now in its second printing. It was also nominated for an International Book Award. And all this from direct sales only. The book is currently only available for sale on my online bookstore, lastskywriting.com. That's LASTSKYWRITING.com. You can order the beautiful full-color print edition, and there are a limited number of autographed copies available as well as unsigned copies, or get the ebook at www.lastskywriting.com. And stay tuned for the audiobook, which will be released this fall. Exciting times! I also want to share with you this shout out for something very different but no less entertaining. My husband and I recently celebrated our 13th anniversary at Rudy's Jazz Room in Nashville, and it was a lot of fun. No, they didn't pay me to say this. We just had such a good time that I wanted to share it with you. I'll put a link to their website in the show notes, but if you haven't heard of Rudy's Room, it is a local gem tucked away in a quiet corner on the edge of the Gulch in Nashville. And here I didn't think there were any quiet corners left in Nashville, but the jazz club itself brings an authentic bit of New Orleans to Nashville with delicious New Orleans dishes, and there's a great variety of jazz music performed there with multiple different shows per week. So check out their calendar and see what's coming up next. I want to thank Sandra Braden for telling us about Rudy's, which is co-owned and operated by her son, Michael Braden, and the other co-owner is Adam Charney. And I thank Sandra's daughter, Kiara, so much for helping to ensure that our evening there was just perfect. And now, let's get into today's interview. This is a Positive Vibes interview episode. The Positive Vibes podcast strives to present a variety of viewpoints from all walks of life. The opinions of interviewees are their own, and you and I may not agree with everything that everybody says. In fact, I'd be worried about us if we did. But all of my guests share this in common. They are positive people who take action to improve themselves and the world around them. And I find that I learn something from every single one. I hope you will, too. Hello again. Dr. Yasmine S here. Today on the Positive Vibes podcast, I'm speaking with Tracy Roberts, CEO and co-founder of Circle Center Consulting, LLC, located in Nashville, Tennessee. Tracy has been facilitating group process in different settings, organizations, and programs his entire career. Now, you'll recall from a previous podcast episode that I have what I call the ORCHID Personal Development Framework. That's O for optimism, R for resilience, C for creativity, H for health, I for integrity, and D for determination. ORCHID. Well, you'll see in this episode that Tracy and Circle Center live and promote all of those ORCHID principles. For instance, integrity. Tracy is passionate about helping groups create meaningful community with integrity as they discuss, explore, and address important issues and work together. Tracy has been a dedicated trainer and mentor to many group facilitators and workplace consultants in the Southeast region and currently facilitates groups all over Middle Tennessee, predominantly in healthcare-related organizations. Tracy is a native of Jackson, Mississippi, and he obtained his degree in social work from the University of Mississippi before getting his master's degree in the same field from the University of Tennessee. Tracy's professional background includes years of dedicated work as an adolescent and family therapist, work in addiction therapy, as a group trainer, and as a corporate organizational consultant. Tracy is an avid sports fan, music lover, hiker, and pinball wizard. We're going to have to talk about that. He proudly served his country in the U.S. Coast Guard from 1987 to 1991. So, Tracy, welcome to Positive Vibes.
Thank you so much. It is so great to be here, and it's nice we're having a little break in our storms today, so the sun is out in many ways. So thank you.
Oh my goodness, that's so true. We have the sunny side for our Positive Vibes podcast, and we have been blessed with sunshine right now, as you said, in many ways. So, Tracy, tell us about the Circle Center and what it is and what a circle is in that context.
So my wife and partner, Leanne, and I started the Circle Center in 2008. I had a big, long history in group facilitation, mostly in a therapeutic sense. And Leanne is a workplace mediator, and also a presence-based coach, and really working with somatics. I went to a circle training in 2006 in Chelsea, Massachusetts. I didn't know what peacemaking circles were, and fell in love with the process. I'm going to guess most people at some point have sat in some form of circle. So there are thousands of ways to do circle that have been on the planet ever since people have been sitting around talking about hard things, talking about easy things. This particular pattern of circles is founded in values and community agreements of how we want to really be with each other. This is not a process that we invented. Like I said, circles have been on every continent on the planet, and it's a process that we have gotten away from, I think, just community in general. And so really intrigued when we started in 2008 where this process would be open. We go where it's open. And like you said earlier, healthcare, a lot of nonprofit, and some for-profit. And then also community circles that we do, maybe special interest circles like civil discourse or racial healing circles.
And so it's a group of people actually sitting in a circle. I mean, maybe help us visualize this.
So we sit in a circle. One of the, there's a couple of things we have to make sure that we can achieve before we even start, and that is finding a space without a table in the middle. And so just moving the table out of the center makes it a little bit of a different meeting space. We may or may not have a centerpiece. Usually the centerpiece is representative of the organization that we go into. I did a circle once with Interfaith Dental here in Nashville, and everyone brought a representative of the work they do, and there were lots of dental instruments in the centerpiece. And that's really cool. Now, if I was working with a group of accountants and they had dental instruments in the middle, so we really ask people to participate and put something in the middle. We like to say no mystery in the middle. There's some organizations where something in the center may actually be a barrier. So we don't have anything in the center. We may just have a candle. So in a circle with the centerpiece, we do use a talking piece in our circle. There's lots of different ways that people may use a talking piece in circle. Some circles don't use a talking piece. We normally go in order, either to the left or the right, and the talking piece is an invitation to speak. If you pass, you're still participating in the process. Some days it's a good strategy just to listen. Sometimes I have to remind myself of that because as the facilitator, people often look at me like, what's next? What are we doing? And so the talking piece, really everything we do in circle, we like to create as an invitation and an opportunity. And I can say before we get there with the chairs in a circle with the centerpiece and the talking piece, we really flesh out and talk about what is the purpose? What are you hoping to take away from meeting in circles? Some circles meet once a month, and one time it's just a one-time thing. I have facilitated peacemaking circles with men in recovery, homeless men in recovery at Room at the End, to all the way to group of Nashville businesswomen. Cable, the group of Nashville businesswomen, we facilitated circles for them. So they both kind of drill down on this is what we would like to take away from the process. We always have a time frame, 2.5 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours. We're real mindful of time and really want to make sure once we start listening to each other, the tendency is to go long. So we have to really monitor that we end on time. And that's one of my roles as a facilitator.
And so, if we could go back a moment, you mentioned taking the table out of the middle and no mystery in the middle. Uh, why sit in a circle instead of a rectangle or around a table? As the many people do when they get in meetings.
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. I really believe since this is such an ancient process that our ancestors practiced, it's just a natural thing. I helped a friend move a couple of years ago, and she got Subway sandwiches for everybody, and we just found ourselves sitting in the circle in the garage. And I think
Naturally.
it's just a natural thing to do. Moving the table, I think, is important, and it creates a little vulnerability. Also, with in our age of our phones, there's my phone. People sometimes have a tendency to keep working under the table. And so it really creates an opportunity for people to put away their device. And we talk about this beforehand. And, if people, well, I need something to write on, we always have clipboards that people can use, and we always have pens. Really getting to that place of the circle, you can see everyone. And I know a lot of times sitting in a square, I can't see the person directly to my left or the person sitting next to them. So there's a geometry in play here where you can see everybody.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned starting with a purpose. You flesh out what is the purpose going to be, what is the takeaway going to be from your session. Could you give us an example of a purpose that a circle group has come up with, or what you facilitate, or what you hope to see the group come up with? I'm not sure exactly how to ask this question, but I will say I'm really big on purpose and intent, and especially if you're going to get a group together for that amount of time. So, what are some examples of takeaways that groups might set for themselves?
So working in healthcare and working in nonprofits, burnout is a real thing. And so a lot of times when we go into organizations, one of the purposes or goals may be to say, we want to increase our awareness around burnout. We want to increase our awareness around stress. We also want to help create connection at the workplace. I know a lot of research shows how important it is to just have one, if you just have one or two friends at work. And so really carving out the time that it takes to get to know somebody, to find out that we're more alike than we are different. Also to increase self-care tools. And so circles is a little bit different in that I've never worked in a hospital, but I've done facilitated circles in a hospital. So I could go in there and say, this is what you need working in a hospital for self-care. What we like to do is for people to share their strategies for self-care on the clock and off the clock. And then really just, an example of that, we're going to meet in circle for a year, reduce our stress and anxiety, become more aware of signs of burnout and stress. So we meet for 2.5 hours once a month, and creating an opportunity to bridge those circles. Because a lot of times when we go to trainings or things like that, Monday morning rolls around and we have forgotten everything that we learned at the training. And so what we like to do is, so what would you like to make a commitment to do around self-care over the next month? And we build in what we call soft accountability, in that if you'd like to, check in on it. So, a classic example, we use something called a neglected stress reducer. I used to go to the yoga studio twice a week. Now I never go. I used to do woodworking. I'm so stressed, I just want to come home and watch Netflix. And so somebody may say, I'm going to finish that bookcase I've been thinking about finishing. And so they check in on it each month. And so really it is an idea of collective care without shame. And I'm pretty transparent. And it's just like, yeah, I could committed to get to Radnor Lake 3 times a week, and I only got once or twice. Next month, I'm going to just try to do the same thing because it's really what I want to do. So that's an example. Some organizations want to do more systematic, like our communication is not great. We want to improve our streams of communication. Leanne is a mediator, so we want to learn about how to manage conflict at work. Like, what are some good strategies? Things like that. So yeah, those are just a couple of ideas. We really try to keep them, especially in the healthcare and nonprofit world, healthcare specific and related, which is a wide net if you really start drilling down and start thinking about what affects our overall health.
Absolutely. Well, that sounds like a holistic approach. And about how many people? What's an average number of people in a circle?
That's a great question. So there's one nonprofit I work with. There's 7 people on their staff. And then we were with a group 2 months ago with 40 in 3 hours. I think 12 to 15 is a great number. And there's this interesting phenomena that happens with 12 or 15, is that there's enough people where I don't think people feel uncomfortable if they pass and don't share. I think the smaller the group, I think people get a little more self-conscious. So, we do groups of 7, maybe groups of 40, but there's a nice, like at our trainings, we do 2 circle trainings a year. We like to cap it at 20, and that's usually 16 or 17 participants and then 2 facilitators, and usually we have a couple of interns. So 20 is a good point.
Yeah. So there's a lot of listening that's involved, I can tell, when you're in a circle, and for the participants and for yourself as a facilitator. That's probably something not a lot of people have cultivated these days. That that skill. It's a skill of listening. Could you speak about that?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. I have a master's degree in social work, and I like to say, therefore, I'm a good listener, right? I have a degree. But what I found myself working in the first 5 or 6 years is I'm talking to a client. And once they start talking about something they may need, I'm going into resource mind, and who can I connect them with, this, that, or the other, and I have stopped listening. Having sat in circle for almost 20 years now, I have found the importance of sitting and listening to the person's entire story, and maybe making a note or two. And I share that with people because sometimes circle feels a little bit, it's a non-clinical process. This is not therapy, but if someone's talking in circle and I take a note, I share beforehand, there's 12 people here. I'm going to forget what you said. So I just want to take a note. And I think it's really empowering for people, especially people who come from oppressed populations who may be low in the hierarchy of power in our society, to be listened to. So we do a lot of storytelling. I love storytelling because everyone's story is they're their own expert. So when people are listened to and their stories are listened to, it is empowering. People love to listen to other people, and they also love being listened to. And so I've stumbled across a lot of epiphanies in circle process. And something I've stumbled across early on was, whenever I'm talking, it's the most important thing that's ever been said on the planet. And I don't care if I'm talking about my dogs or I'm talking about motivational interviewing and harm reduction. And one of my ahas that I've had thousands of them, is I think everybody feels that way. So what if in this process we really practice just listening? And the thing that I really challenge people, don't rehearse, especially when people are at work and they want to sound smart and they want to sound, there's a time and place. So there really is this practice of not rehearsing what you're going to say as the talking piece comes your way.
So I have to ask, how did you get into this, Tracy? This is such a unique niche. It really is.
So I was working. There's an organization in Nashville called the Oasis Center, and they used to have a program for 17 to 21-year-olds experiencing homelessness, and I was the clinical case manager. And I was burnt out. This is in 2007, I think, and I was done with social work. And there's an organization in Chelsea, Massachusetts called ROCA, and ROCA works with 13 to 24-year-olds. They've since franchised out to Springfield, Massachusetts, and Baltimore. And they were doing this circle process, and they were doing this circle process with Department of Children's Services, juvenile court, victim offender programs, and big bureaucratic school systems. And so the powers that be at where I worked at Oasis Center were really intrigued with this organization. And I got selected to go to the circle training. And I didn't want to go, and I'm kind of done with social work. So I walk in a room, there's 30 strangers. Didn't know anybody, and they had a centerpiece, and they had a talking piece. And I thought, but I knew they were working with these big systems. And so long story short, after about 2 hours in that space, I felt my feet firmly planted in a river that I did not know existed. So some nonprofits you run across, they talk the talk, they don't walk the walk. ROCA is walk the walk. The executive director was the trainer, Molly Baldwin, one of my teachers in circle process. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to stay in social work, if I'm going to stay in this process, this is the work I'm going to do. I worked in lots of residential programs, and got burnt out from that also. And so, I want to support people who work in those programs, who suffer vicarious trauma, burnout, stress. And then, Leanne naturally got on board because peacemaking circle process and mediation sometimes, especially with bigger community disputes. So we started Circle Center in 2008.
How has this, you've hinted at this, but I want to hear more about how this is different from what you were doing in clinical social work. What makes this different for you, for the participants?
What makes it most different is, in that space, there is as much equality as you can get. We talk a lot in our training how do you make sure there's safety? So when I was a group therapist, everyone knew it was on me to make sure that the space was safe. What happens in circle process, beyond somebody picking up a chair and throwing it, which is kind of where we go to worst case scenario about safety. Okay, let's talk about emotional safety. Let's just, and how we can hurt each other with our words, maybe even microaggressions. And what happens in circle process, we build enough trust, and we do that through everyone creating the values, everyone coming up with the community agreements. So how do we practice these together in a good way? And I may ask questions like that, and I'll pass the talking piece, and it's really up for the group to decide. This is how we're going to be with each other. For me, as a therapist in that situation, I am the therapist. Most times I had been meeting individually with everybody in the group, and it's really directed towards a specific issue or a problem that somebody may be having. Sometimes feedback is welcome, sometimes it's not. And it takes a little while. One of my favorite circle processes that happens, and it had never really happened in group therapy. If I'm meeting with a group for a year, once a month, a lot of times after about the third or fourth month, they'll start kind of pushing me out of the way and start getting a little bit more real and vulnerable. And I start talking less. And they understand that this is, we don't like to say safe space or brave space so much, but an accountable space. And so people really start taking ownership of it, that this is a space. I also say things may come up that you want to take to your therapist. I can say, and I always hesitate to say this, I have facilitated over 1,000 peacemaking circles over the years, and nobody has really shared anything that made you cringe and say that's not appropriate. Not that that doesn't happen or could happen, but on the front end, we really make sure that people understand what space they are in. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And it makes me wonder what kinds of groups, the spectrum of groups you've worked with, because this seems like it could apply, across different backgrounds and different fields. And maybe you could talk about the variety of groups that you've worked with.
Yeah. So, just trying to think a lot of the nonprofits we work with, most of them are client centered in that they do have clients that come in. There's an organization, and so the organizations I can talk about, I've gotten permission to talk about. And so we worked with the YWCA's domestic violence residential program, and really having worked residential, I had a general idea of what it was like to work there. We're working with the Tennessee Higher Education and Prison Initiative. They provide educational resources to people that are incarcerated, and then have transitional programs for people after they get out. Half of their staff is formerly incarcerated that receive their services inside. They talk a lot about collective care, of how they want to be together. I worked with Dispensary of Hope here in Nashville for almost 13 years. So Dispensary of Hope doesn't have a traditional client base. They provide medicines, and their business model changed over 12 years, but they really have a big warehouse, and they do lots of networking nationally to get these medicines out. The people that work in the warehouse have a lot different job than the networking people, than the marketing people, than the IT people. So those are just a couple examples. We also have done a couple of one-offs, like I said, with the civil discourse circle we had after the 2016 presidential election, where people wanted to have civil discourse about the land of politics that we were living in. And I've also facilitated like racial healing circles, just having an understanding. We like to say circle is not for everything and every time and everybody. It's just not. And I usually, like I said, I think earlier, we tend to go where it's open.
When you say that, you tend to go where it's open. Are you talking about the physical space or more? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Where we've identified a need, where there's a leader who's going to participate in the process. Sometimes we want to do this process. Sometimes we may hear, yeah, our staff needs to do this, that, or the other. We are the whole organization. I'm a big fan of Peter Senge and the fifth discipline. And I know he talks about sometimes leaders talk about like they're separate from the organization. And Senge drills down on this, like when you turn on a faucet, the faucet can't work until, like, if you have any sway in the organization, you're part of the organization. So we really have to work, is the leader on board? Most of the times we get hired by leaders that are thinking outside the box. They see the value of the people that work in their organization and belonging. They want to belong. They want to be mission and vision. And also leaders who aren't afraid to ask for help or say, I don't know. So for me, that's the big thing of the open place. I did not seek working like with THEI. I was sought. I got a phone call and said, hey, can you come to Circle with us? And through that, I have been working a little bit more with people that are incarcerated. That was not on my radar. That's just where it was open. And sometimes by force, I want to make things open and they're just not.
Yeah,
So,
we all have experienced that, I think. Yeah. Are there a variety of age ranges that could participate in Circle?
I say any and all. When I worked with young, and I miss working with young people. I don't work with young people as much. And so when I worked at Oasis Center, we would have young people as young as 13, but also we would have. So I worked at the shelter for a little while. It was 13 to 17-year-olds. 2-week respite program, residential. They may be struggling at home, maybe some mental health issues, maybe behavioral issues. So they would come. I was the therapist and also a practicing Circle facilitator. So every Wednesday night we had multifamily group. So there would be little brothers and sisters in the process. And gosh, my favorite circle is also at 50 Forward. I had groups with people in their 80s who just really were starving for community, starving for purpose. I know with the new, everything's technologically based, they feel a little bit left out. And so honoring the eldership and being in spaces like that, we're pretty specialists too.
Yeah. What outcomes have you seen from the Circle process? Maybe you could talk about that a bit.
So a lot of times when we go into organizations, we'll have on the front end, do you feel connected with your coworkers? Do you have tools to manage your stress? Are you aware how stressed you are? When Leanne really focuses on the workplace conflict piece, do you feel confident to address conflict at work? Do you feel your voice matters at work? Because we do get to a place, normally Circle maybe 2.5 hours. That first hour and 15 minutes is storytelling, values, community agreements. The second piece may be us breaking out into groups of 3, saying, our communication really needs some help. What's your experience with communication? How could it, no bad ideas. How could it improve? What are we doing that's just not working? So we may break out into small groups like that. So we want to increase our communication tools and awareness. Maybe we want to increase our ability to step into conflicts, which will hopefully make us have better communication. We want to feel like we're connected better at work, which may reduce our anxiety and stress. I've had when people there's a TED Talk we watch, Amy Edmondson, who's from Harvard. She talks about psychological safety at work. And this is something we may talk about. They studied 6 groups at 6 different hospitals. So which group reported the most medical errors? Surprisingly enough, that group had the most trust on their team because they had the ability to say, we made a mistake and I did this, hoping to improve, not shame-based or job termination. So that's the research that she showed. And it really is the box she uses. It's, when leadership doesn't do 2 or 4, it's with. So you'll see this increase. So maybe an increase of transparency and vulnerability. So those are some of the outcomes on the this side, these bridges of empathy that are created with people who work with each other usually is not something we'll write in a grant, and it happens. We were joking today in Circle. We had a really long circle where a lot of heartfelt things were shared, and somebody said, "What do you call this?" So, well, it's magic.
It's magic.
You can't write that in a grant either. So some of it's real, self-care tools, increase our communication, reduce our anxiety and stress, reduce turnover rate. Other the things, and Dr. Rachel Remen just talks about these things that we can't measure that are just super important. And that's what happens a lot in Circle.
Yeah. Are there any particular moments that have stood out to you in your career at the Circle Center so far?
Yes. So I think I'm going to, the Civil Discourse Circle, after the Trump and Clinton election in 2016, somebody contacted me. They run a studio here in Nashville, and through a mutual friend, I got on a call with her, and she said, this was in November, December. She said, my Republican friends are chewing my ear and my Democrat friends are chewing my ear. We got to do better. So I pulled in 5 or 6 people that I know voted for Clinton, and 3 or 4 people that voted for Trump, and 2 or 3 that voted for Johnson, whoever, under the auspices of civil discourse. When I think of civil, I think that's a positive thing. One of the participants is a liberal woman, said, yeah, I'm going to invite my conservative brother. He loves making Democrats angry. I was like, no, he's got a lot of places to do that. That's not what we're doing. And so we met under, what is the purpose? A is to have civil discourse, and B is to create strategies to have more civil discourse. So like, what does it look like? How do we know we're in it? So I think there were 15 of us. We did an opening check-in. And I didn't have my second question. I really lean into this trust the process. And I didn't want to drive it. I was hoping it would come from the group. And so the second question was, what was a value in yourself that you saw in the politician you voted for? So we're getting out of that policy headspace and going into the deep value space. And it got real. And what I saw happening is the people that disagreed politically totally dialed in to listening people who they probably thought that morning, I'm going to have a problem with this person. and it got real, and we took a deep dive, and we went around talking about civil discourse. We made a list of these values, these ways that we wanted to be. That group, we met for 18 more months, once a month. And what we like to say at that first circle was minds weren't changed, hearts were changed. So this idea of we're going to disagree. How can I still respect you as a human being, still hold you as an expert in your life? And that's hard to do. So that's one of the things that really has stood out in the process, is just this idea of standing in disagreement, sitting in disagreement and discomfort, and being able to hold it. Yeah, I've got lots and lots of circle stories that have stood out, but that's one that I really like to go to. It gives me hope. You know?
Yeah, yeah. And I think civil discourse is certainly something Positive Vibes is interested in, because we do all come from different backgrounds. And so, what does that, you hinted at it or even gave a bit of a definition, but I'd love to hear more about what civil discourse means to you, because it sounds to me as though the whole circle process is based on civil discourse.
I love that question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that. I would say part of, it reminds me of, I told somebody once we're going to do a training on active listening in circle, and all we did was listen, and somebody got very upset because there's like 7 steps to active listening. It's like, yeah, but we're going to practice listening. So for me, because we always want to jump to the next thing, like, because part of active listening is repeating, and we always want to jump to that piece. So the simple piece of it is respecting the person who's holding the talking piece. And I've been in so many meetings where people get interrupted. Like, I come from a family of 5. One of my brothers has a photographic memory. The other one's a defense attorney. I didn't get to talk a lot as a kid. So keeping it civil is getting everyone an opportunity to speak and be heard. And I think another piece of the civil piece is creating values of the ways we want to practice. So we practice being in that space, how we want to be outside this space. So kindness is a big thing for me. Something happens when I drive on the highway that I had kindness on my odometer written on a little piece of paper for years, because for some reason I lost that when I get in my car. So it's good to have a reminder. Circle is these ways that I think we really want to be civil with each other. Listen to everybody. Don't interrupt. I think it's civil to have like a goal in mind. Like, this is why we're meeting. This is the purpose of. We had somebody make fun of circle once and say, "What are we going to sing Kumbaya for the next 2 hours?" And I'm like, well, if you'd like to, we can do that. That wasn't our intent. That's not why I'm here. So I think what keeps it, just no matter where you fall in our community, you're going to have an opportunity to speak. And I think the people that need the most, I think a lot of times the people that struggle with it the most are the people who have the most power or education, because they're used to having the microphone, or white men like me. I've had a lot of training, taking risks, saying the hard thing, kind of raised that way in our society. And I think a lot of times when people of color who haven't had, or women who haven't had enough experience with those reps, when they have the talking piece, giving that opportunity is also very civil. And I think it's beyond important. I think it's just crucial for community, for every voice to be heard equally in the space. And I think this has to do with that. So my friend Molly Baldwin, who runs Roca, has this beautiful story. So I like to think, they're going to get a grant for $2 million. And she said before Circle, she would pull in a couple of leaders and they decide what to do with the money. And there'd be people talking about, I can't believe they did this, that. So the civility they added to that process is now she'll pull in staff to Circle because they've been doing Circle forever. She may pull in a board member or two, a volunteer, a couple of clients, and just say, I am the executive director. I have to decide how to spend this money. I need your input. You can choose to give me your input or not, but I really want your input because I need to make the best decision. And she passes the talking piece. And she'll take notes. And there's a book, Doing Democracy with Circles. The research shows if community organizations members, if they understand that their opinion has been heard, they're much more likely to not triangulate and gossip and get on board if their opinion was not chosen. And that's what that's what she has created at Roca. So it's adding that civility to these processes that we've kind of been trained, like this is the only way to get through it is through what's uncivil ways.
I've seen that principle in place so many times in leadership settings. When people feel heard, then they are much more likely to go along with the final decision, even if it wasn't maybe what they were advocating at first. If they feel as though they've been able to have a say in the process, that goes a long way.
Yeah, and it's just a failure of our Western model. I was talking to a group of nurses once, as what is it with the changes that are happening at this hospital? And one of them said, it's like we're all in the parking lot looking at the car engine, trying to figure out what needs. And leadership comes in and they just push us out of the way and start moving stuff and close the hood. And leadership does that for a reason because there's usually money attached to their decisions and this, that, or the other. I think if we all took the time to just get to know each other better, and the people from different parts of the system could chime in and say, this is, I think, what I see the problem is, it would save a lot of money and a lot of time. That makes sense.
It does. And, something else you've said about the circle process, you mentioned what happens inside the circle or what we learn to practice inside circle. We want to practice outside circle as well. And so I want to ask you, how do you practice outside circle? How do you practice civil discourse? I'm sure that you come across, we all do, we're all human beings. We come across people that we disagree with, whose opinions we disagree with. What do you do? How do you handle that?
So I come from a family of interrupters. And outside of my family, I didn't really have the room to interrupt. Outside, I do for, how family is. I like to tell people family, if you meet in circle with your family, that's advanced circle keeping.
I love that.
So one of the things I've become really aware of is cutting people off. A bad habit. And I do it less. I try not to beat myself up when I still do it, because I still do it. It is that neural pathway for whatever reason, and I'm trying to push it. Also using humor. And I've shared this in circle, but I also took this to my therapist office. The way I connected as a young person, as a child and an adolescent, the way I felt like I belonged and connected was through humor, my use of humor. And what I found out in circle, that not always the best strategy for me to say the funny thing. Now there's a 3-year-old inside me that wants to make the connection, but the 61-year-old in me takes him, and I've learned this through circle process, just put my arm around and said, this isn't the appropriate time. You can connect later. We'll meet again next month. So I just find myself taking that out. My niece got married last weekend. You know, she might as well still be 7, and we're playing Mario Kart. I mean, she's in her late 30s. I can't keep interrupting her and say the funny thing and this, that, or the other. Also, being curious, ask and saying the hard thing. And we share this with organizations once. Some organizations are acronym heavy, especially when I meet with healthcare organizations. Well, the RNV didn't pass it, and so I will ask people, can we share what these acronyms mean? Like, what are you talking about? And then usually 3 or 4 people go, they're not going to say anything, but they'll go, okay. So I didn't know what they meant either. So part of what I learned that I practice outside is asking for clarity. Clarity is kind, is what we like to say in Circle. So asking for what I need, not talking as much, not being the funny person, and also really leaning into diversity and making sure that I try to surround myself in community that all don't think, look like me. So I've really begun the practice of that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. What circles do you have coming up, or maybe topics that people might be interested in? And I'm going to include a link to the Circle Center in the show notes, but maybe you could talk about what's in the future, the near future for the Circle Center.
Well, the thing I'm most excited about, my friend Mary A.G., who is a mindfulness practitioner. She was the mindfulness coordinator at University School here in Nashville for a while. Her and I are going to start offering what we're calling a digital detox circle. And the flyers coming out this week. It's going to be 6 weeks, June 17th through July 22nd, once a week for 2.5 hours. And it's basically a circle for about 10 or 12 people who would like to be on their phone less. And so, I've got a history. I was a drug and alcohol therapist, also went through drug and alcohol treatment center in 89. So this isn't that, in that the belief that, this phone, I have my calendar's on it, email, text, but I go into this process of either it's a habit or an addiction to pick it up, to scroll more than I'd like to. Do I really need to check the weather 27 times each day? So really it's with a group of people who want to be on their phone less, get into the mindfulness component, and creating strategies with each other, what being on their phone would look like. So this is our first cohort. So we're going to learn a lot. Something will emerge that's not on our radar. I'd love to take this forward. I really think this is the addiction, the next addiction that is, I sit at a stoplight sometimes, and it is just amazing how many people are on their phone, and I want to say disconnected from their body, disconnected from their real emotions and feelings. And that's where the mindfulness piece that I don't have a mindfulness background. So Mary and I are a good team around that. So that for me is my most exciting thing coming up.
That's very timely. And we're recording this podcast about at least a month in advance. So that circle may already be running by the time this episode comes out. Do you think that you'll run it again? Because I think it's such a great topic for people.
We will run it again if it's open. Everybody, it's interesting because we already have 3 people signed up who they brought up the conversation at lunch. 3 different lunches, 3 different people. I never even said anything about it. And I said, "Hey, would you be interested?" And they, before I could get the ask out, they said, "Yes, I'll be there. Tell me when."
Oh, wow. So I totally see now what you mean by open. Okay. Get
And it's
it.
our model for addiction and recovery and all that is really abstinence based. And I really think this moderation piece is interesting. Anything can get you in trouble. Anything from sports gambling to chocolate pie to phones. And the phones they're so amazing, and they can cause so much demise. So
Well, and of course, you know that the smartphones are engineered that way to tap into the addiction pathway, the dopamine hits. So it's
yeah.
very, what you're talking about is very much supported by science. I think you're spot on there. Yeah. So, Tracy, we're going to switch gears for a moment. I have to ask you about being a pinball wizard. So you've got to tell us about this.
So that's something you just can't say. It's true. So as a young person, it was, I think, Space Invade. We had Pong growing up with the 2 paddles. We had pinball machines, and I like to say, the microchip is kind of limited when you compare it to gravity, rubber, and steel.
Yep.
And I'm probably wrong about that because I said it 30 years ago, but I'm standing by it. So I grew up playing pinball. I don't play as much as I used to, but one of the greatest gifts I ever got, Leanne surprised me on my 40th birthday with a pinball machine.
Wow.
I actually was the owner of a pinball machine. There's a league here in Tennessee and in Nashville. I just haven't made that step to join. I've always just loved it.
Ah, wow. And now, is that one of your stress relievers?
Yes. Yeah.
What else do you what else do you do for stress relief?
Do lots of hiking. Radnor Lake is really close to us. Kind of commune with the trees and the critters. Um, Also learning more and more about astronomy. So really getting into the different stars in the summer, the different stars in the winter, and being able to identify them by name. And then also we go see live music. And
Wow.
so yeah, I mean that's it. It's an interesting thing that I've created with me. I am least stressed when I'm at work on the clock in circle.
So when you're in circle doing really following your passion, doing the work of your passion and your purpose, you're in what the psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi would call flow. That's a
Yes.
flow state. And I'll talk more about that on some other episodes of Positive Vibes, perhaps. But it's really interesting to me that you have found the work th that makes you feel most alive, I would say.
It really is, and it's interesting when you kind of meet your people, because like I said, circle's not for everybody. My favorite circle people are the ones, you're going to do a year engagement. After about the 3rd or 4th month, they're kind of like putting their toe in there. And then they start talking about concepts and ideas that you experienced 12 or 15 years through the process. I had a young healthcare executive who was very suit and tied, and you could tell the first 2 or 3 months, he's like, after about the 4th month, he's like, this circle process is like, he's like, I drive down Gallatin Road after work every day and I pass the Y where I'm supposed to work out. And I don't want to go to the Y. And I pass, and then I come back. Every time when I'm done at the Y, I'm so glad I went. He said, that's how I feel about circle. Because he's a people person. That's why he got into healthcare. But he's, like, the work just covers me up. I don't have time to do this. And he said, every time when we're done, I'm so thankful that I did this. So that resonates with why I do this work. And I had another healthcare leader. One of the storytelling prompts, because storytelling is really about storytelling. Talk about your pet philosophy, dogs, cats, as a child. Like, where are you? And just to have a senior leader be that vulnerable, because they look at the guy, he's got lots of letters after his name, and newer people on the staff, and just to have that welcoming space of, we're all human beings. We all got work to do, and we're going to do it, but we're going to carve out a little time to get to know each other a little bit better, to create these bridges of empathy with each other. And I think the more we find out, the more alike we are than different, we start to pull for each other. And I think we really need that in our communities and societies these days. Is how do we pull for each other? How do we figure out we kind of need the same stuff? We may have different strategies. So for me, I just feel at place there when people take a risk to share who they are as human beings, which sometimes is a big ask because it's not welcome.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Tracy, I have a final question that I ask all my guests, but before we get to that, uh, give us the website address for the Circle Center. And again, the link will be in the show notes, but just for those who are listening, if you could say the address, and then tell us anything else you want us to know before we wrap up and have that final question.
So www, one word, thecirclecenter.com. We do 2-3 day circle trainings a year at Scarrett Bennett here in Nashville. Our next one's August. We always advertise on our website. We also have a national circle keeper gathering. This will be our 9th year. We're at Scarrett Bennett. So Kay Pranis comes. She's one of the kind of circle thought leaders. She's been doing this work for 35 years. And then also Tanaga Yako, who is a Mohawk, Ojibwe woman from Minnesota. She'll come and join us. She's been our circle teacher for the past 8 years. And we have people from around the planet who will come. There's usually 30 of us or so. So those are the two big next things that we have coming. That's usually in October.
All right, great. Great. So, okay, the motto of positive vibes is keep on the sunny side. So, Tracy, what do you do to keep on the sunny side?
And the irony is it happens at night. So Vega is the summer star, Capella is the winter star, and I'll do movement while looking at Vega and Capella, and I have a mantra that I say, and it's really based in they're made of carbon, I'm made of carbon, and just being joyful for the mystery. I get goosebumps thinking of all like how far away that planet is, and we're kind of made of the same thing. And so a lot of times when I go into Circle, I will say, I am Vega, I am Capella, I belong. I am Vega, I am Capella, and I belong. And that just it's for me, it's beyond joy. It's something I don't have words for. It's connection.
It's
On that deep
connection.
level.
Oh, I love that. It's connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Tracy, for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. It's great to see you.
You too. Thanks again.